Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week's theme of bands that broke up with Yellow Swans, which I kind of always thought this was just the band Swans, but I went and looked back and there's actually two bands. One's called Swans, one's called Yellow Swans, and I have never had these on the channel before. So I don't know what to expect, but at 13 minutes, we're in for a bit of a ride, I think. So, let's see what's going on here with Yellow Swans' Opt Out. I was starting to think that this is Swans. Both of them have it seems, a penchant for long, drawn-out sections. I don't know if it's the very wide white noise existing on both sides but pushed out to the extreme, or if it's these ethereal crescendos and decrescendos of these textures. I don't even know if I can call them tones. That humming that just exists. It seems very eerie is what I'm getting at. Like, of course, there are pitches in both the crescendo and just that sound in the backgrounds. But it's not why they were chosen. The texture was to craft an atmosphere. It's really easy to miss these little droplet sounds. Like little hand drums where the edges have been kind of turned up. You kind of get a whoop, whoop kind of sound to it. Just ping-ponging all around. It's interesting too that the white noise is kind of, at least in my mind, taking on the shape of beads against the gourd. And you just kind of, shake the gourd, you twist it back and forth, and the beads rattle against it. I think it's still just white noise, but that's where my mind has taken that sound. Like, my brain's trying to understand this in the acoustic sense that it knows. Gotta have the volume up on this one. I think I just turned mine up just a hair. And it's quite overwhelming. It's interesting that at this point, the main instrument here is playing with repeated attacks, a lot of repeated attacks. Keep that in mind. It's going to be a topic I bring up later. the audio visualizer is right now. I gotta find a way to put that on the screen for y'all to see. Turn it down just a little bit on my part. Okay. There we go. So this was Drone. Reminded me a bit of, is it Earth that we checked out recently? That was like 30 minutes of Drone. The song's called Opt Out, and I would like to do that early in the track. Jokes aside, though, there are some really interesting things in here. Um, as a preface, though, I don't know how much I'm going to talk about the music. What would be on the sheet, on paper, what you could actually write down, because honestly, there's like two licks in here, and they're, I don't know, a, a bar long, half a bar long, depending on what kind of tempo you're deciding to keep here. Just repeated ad nauseum. The raw music is not that interesting. There just isn't a lot here. The sonic side, the production side, the performance side, possibly as well, is where this song has depth and has things I want to talk about. And that's pretty typical for electronic music. Well, let me say it, it's typical for this kind of electronic music. Because electronic isn't And there's no rules that says it has to be musically simple, but sonically or production-wise complex. But there is, an entire subset of electronic music that does tend to fit better in that category than something that is more musically complex. So, yeah, there's just two sides of electronic. Anyways, trying to dig myself out of a hole of a sentence I just said. uh, so, yeah, I think most of this topic is going to be about production. And since the song is rather one note, it does one thing and explores it with a bit of depth to it. I don't think this is going to be a very lengthy video, despite it being a 13-minute song. So, with all that said, let's dig into what the track is doing. And this is where I think things are interesting. I had a lot of comments to make at the beginning about sounds, about the production. I had less to say at the end, and the reason for that is a lot of the end is white noise. It's distortion, it's static that overwhelms everything else. All of the details that we're picking out we're beginning to sink, to be drowned under a rising static level. The room was filling with white noise, and some sounds didn't make it out. But the beginning had a lot of really interesting ideas in it. We had the two different sets of static on either ear, really pushed, quite a bit out. Had a lot of width to them, a lot of distance. Um, we had a humming sound dead center, but felt like it was behind me, not in front of me. And it had a tone to it. But like I had mentioned during the reaction, the note itself, the pitch wasn't as important as the texture, as simply just being there with that level of distortion to it, allowing it to be this electrical hum, a foundational element, so to speak, the baseline of the song that everything else builds on top of. There were these really nice crescendos and decrescendos with the notes swelling into a volume and then fading out. And all of it just kind of feels very eerie to me. And I couldn't quite place why. Other than the fact, this sounds like eerie music, right? But why? I'm trying to hone down what is the cultural reason that this sounds creepy to me? And I think I figured it out. There is this thing that happens on ghost hunting shows or movies about ghosts when they try to pick up the voice of these ghosts, and they have like an acronym for it or something. I don't know. I'm not going to say that I'm a big fan of this genre well, especially TV show. Movies are fine because there's like that layer of fiction, but TVs always try to sell them as real, and I'm just going to go on record here. I don't believe in ghosts. Take that for what you will. I'm not saying they don't exist. I just don't believe that they exist. I haven't been shown that evidence yet. Um. Anyways, though, what is it? Electro voice phenomenon? Is that it? EVP? Maybe. I don't know. Um. I'm trying to remember from the new Ghostbusters. uh. Anyways, you have to crank the volume up on these microphones really high in order to catch these uh, electrical pulses that these ghosts are making, right? So what you end up is with a recording that you can't really denoise, or else it will affect this super quiet voice you're picking up. So you get all this static and crackliness and all this ambient sound coming into the recording. And that's what this kind of reminds me of. And I wonder if that's why it sounds eerie to me, because this same context, the same atmosphere of just crackles and pops and hums and creaks is typically how this, I think I said EVP phenomenon is portrayed in audio. So again, I don't think this really has much to do with the song, but I really wanted to go into it because I think it's important to address where our biases come from, why we find music to be happy or sad or creepy, and see if it's tied to an intrinsic element of the music or an extrinsic element, like our culture and how these sounds are utilized in pop culture specifically, which seems to be very influential in how we respond to music and sounds. But yeah, I wanted to go into that real quick because I thought that was neat. Um, so anyways, it sounds very eerie to me. We have all these fade ins, fade outs, statics, hums, and then there started to be these crackles and pops. And what's really interesting is that over time, as I had mentioned, I kind of my brain took to understanding these in an acoustic manner. Let me see if I can find a picture of a gourd bead instrument. I hope that's good enough to get as a web search. Oh, beautiful. Let me pull this up real quick. So there's a bunch of them here. And as you can see, it's just a gourd with beads held together by a string. And when you twist it around the z-axis, the beads kind of shift behind the gourd and they end up rattling with it. And it creates these really cool percussive textures. And that's kind of what all these cracks and crackles and pops ended up sounding like to me after a while. And it was almost like my brain was attempting to interpret this noise. And I say that positively. I'm not saying, oh, turn that noise off. No, it's just a lot of sounds not designed to, again, evoke music in a sense, in a traditional sense, but to just fill up space with sounds, which is kind of a definition of what noise is. It's just a bunch of sounds. Um, but again, I say it in a very positive manner. But my brain was trying to interpret this noise in a way that it understands what is going on here. Well, this is just noisy crackling. Well, what if it's a shaker? And I'm like, my brain goes, that's the best explanation I got. Let's send it. Let's send it to the thought process. And then it pops into my brain. Oh, that sounds like a shaker. uh, but yeah, it's kind of fascinating how my brain was attempting to figure out this in a sense it makes, or in a perspective it makes sense to it. This was also the part where we began to add in, again, interpreting this in a way that makes sense to me, black metal tremolo picking. It says it's electronic music. I'm going to wager that this was a synthesizer or a keyboard with some sort of 16th note reverb or delay on it. Or echo, actually, would probably be it. But the end result is this abrasive note. Well, it's a note with an abrasive texture to it that is played repeatedly. Just like black metal does. You don't hold out a note. You play that note repeatedly until you move on to the next. And especially with all the distortion and the fuzz and the crackles and the pops, black metal, I think, is a very clear analogy for what that instrument was doing there. It was attempting to create a melody, and for a while I could hear it. The brain is really good at figuring out what is erroneous noise and not putting energy towards figuring out what it's doing. All right, especially when it comes to hearing. Now, this is for almost any stimulus. But especially when it comes to hearing, your brain is really good at taking all this in and saying, well, that's trash, that's garbage, we don't need to know about that. And then saying, this is something that the body needs to know about, and, processing that auditory information into thought or whatever. I don't know, the brain's complex. Um, and there was certainly a point in this track where I was able to just sort of push all the noise out as this garbage sound. Don't even need to process it. And I could hear the music. And again, like I had mentioned earlier, there's not a lot to the music. It's these very simple riffs or licks. Uh, what is the electronic phrase for that? Because like in classical, we call it an ostinato. In jazz, we'd call it a lick. Metal and rock has the riff, but this, short repeated phrase. I don't know. If someone wants to let me know, that'd be awesome. Just continue to expand my vocabulary there. Um, yeah, it's just a short repeated phrase, just over and over and over. Um, but I began to hear the music underneath all the texture, and there is a lot of texture in this track. But the water never stopped rising. The white noise was still growing from the very beginning of the track. Our musical elements, some of the rhythmic things. Oh, I forgot about those cool droplet plops. The boop, boop, boop. Those are really cool. They were like a percussive, like it was raining. And, rain pitter patters everywhere around you. And, so these little percussive droplet sounds were just happening everywhere, left and right, just ping ponging back and forth. Very cool. That was before the tremolo picked synthesizer. Could you imagine a synthesizer that, well, I guess it'd just be like some sort of MIDI guitar, right? A synthesizer you'd have to pluck. I don't know. Uh, but yeah, that was before that section. That was another really cool sound. But this whole time, the static has been rising and rising, and it's slowly swallowing up everything. In fact, even at this point, the tremolo picked line is gone as well. I guess I don't have to say pick. Tremolo is a digital effect, isn't it? You can just put a tremolo effect on it, and it's the same thing. Yeah. Anyways, I'm slowly learning some production stuff. It's pretty cool. Okay, so it's slowly rising, and that fast moving line gets replaced with this just lengthy, these really long suspended notes. And we get a little bit of a notion of this at the end when the static fades first and we get to hear this melody. Well, it's, it's a very slow moving melody. It's not really a chord progression, I think, because it's just one note. It's a series of single notes. I do think that we could interpret them as root tones and build chords off of that, but they're not chords. It's not a progression. It's just a series of single held out notes. And we do get to hear both the texture and the 4-bar phrase out of this. But the static is overpowering everything. Those droplets completely gone. The hum, it might be there. I don't know. Can't hear it anymore. If that tremolo synth line is there, can't hear it. It really gets to a point where you can sort of hear these long suspended notes if you really look for them, but at least to my ear, the noise had taken over. It wasn't something I could disregard anymore, and my brain had transitioned it from garbage sound to be disregarded to the core element of the music and something to be paying attention to. It is an important element. It's no longer background noise. And I suppose we can't forget about the fact that somewhere in all of this, I don't know if it was when the static was at its peak or as it was building, there was human chanting or wailing. Half the time it sounded like some sort of ritual where we had somebody chanting stuff, and the other half it felt painful. Someone wailing in distress. And so we have a song that explores a lot of ideas, but none of them can escape the bleak snow, the rising water. None of them can be loud enough to be heard over the noise. It's called Opt Out. And I did make a little joke about it at the beginning, but I do think that there is a purpose for this. It's really easy in our lives for the noise to overpower the good, for the stress and, I don't know, all the negativity in life to be louder than the things that are positive, the things that are worth living for, the just, I don't know, just being calm and stress free. um, and at least my takeaway from this is no matter how much you want to scream some of that, the negativity can always get louder. The best way to move on is to opt out of the drama, to opt out of the stress, to opt out of the noise. And that's what we saw at the end. The noise faded out first, and we got to hear some of that really cool texture on that, kind of like a distorted organ, and the melody it was playing. We never really reached the point of tranquility, so I'm not sure that this is exactly what their intention is, but it is the narrative I got out of this track. In a very metaphorical way, the music is our need for positivity, and the noise is the negative aspects, the drama. And you just got to opt out of it. Those are my thoughts. Sorry, those are my thoughts on Yellow Swans' Going Places. What did you think? Did you enjoy it? Anything you'd like to add on to or correct me on? Maybe you just want to let me know about your experience with this track. Let me know those things down in the comments. Above the comment section is a description box, and in there is a link for Linktree. Takes you to this menu right here. It has links for everything related to the channel. You can find my music. You can find a link to the Discord community. You can find multiple ways to support the channel and so much more. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. We have a special selection today. We also have a new track. We don't have a creator request lined up for our third video today, so I went and found a brand new track that came out last week, and I'm pretty stoked to get to. Oh, 5 days ago. Pretty stoked to get to. 5, 6, yeah, something like that. I don't know, man. Dates are hard. And we'll do that as well. Tomorrow there is nothing, but I'm going to try really hard to get my AOTY video out tomorrow. Sunday we'll have our live stream, and Monday we'll be back with our usual stuff. So until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.